Okay, so we are going to talk about different angle pair relationships. If you received this chart, great, so that you can just take notes on it. If not, you can create one on your own and then just transfer it when you actually get one. So here is the angle relationships. We're going to focus on one box at a time, and I would like to start off with first adjacent angles. So I'm going to kind of zoom it in here. Okay, so for adjacent angles, by definition, there's two angles that are next to each other and share a common side. So when you are talking about adjacent angles, I could say that angle 1 and angle 2 are adjacent because they share the same vertex and they share a side. Adjacent angles cannot overlap. Okay? Here's an example of something that is not adjacent. So these are non-examples. A non-example would be this scenario. Okay, 1 and 2 are not adjacent because they share a common vertex, but they do not share a side. Angle 1 is made up of this, and angle 2 is made up of those two rays, so they do not share a common side. Let's see if I can zoom in here. And then another non-example would be those two angles because they do not have a common vertex and nor do they share a side. So those are examples of adjacent angles. And this is what we have been working on with the angle addition postulate as well. So just kind of keep in mind that when you have non-adjacent angles, or excuse me, when you have adjacent angles, that this angle plus that angle equals the entire angle. Okay, so those are adjacent angles. Let's go on to complementary angles. Complementary angles are two angles whose sum is 90 degrees. There are two different scenarios that you could have here. You could have adjacent angles that they still have a sum of 90. Remember, 90 we've already talked about being a right angle. Okay, so we have this example. So if it has the right angle indicator, that would be example of complementary. Or if we said that this was 71 degrees and this was 19 degrees. Together they add up to be 90 degrees, which makes them complementary. Here's another example. So here, these are adjacent. You could also have non-adjacent. So if this were my 71 degrees, and let's turn this one and make this 19 degrees. So even though they still add up to 90, so they still are complementary, they are non-adjacent. Both are okay. Okay, so those are examples of complementary angles. Supplementary angles. Two angles whose sum is 180 degrees. So just like the complementary, they can either be adjacent or non-adjacent. So supplementary is 180, and that is what forms, typically we think of forms a line. So if we have this scenario, and I said that this angle is 120 degrees, and this angle here is 60 degrees, 120 plus your 60 does give you your 180. So this is an example of adjacent supplementary angles. And just like the last ones, I could split those apart and make this my 120 and then a separate 60. So these are examples of non-adjacent supplementary angles. Linear pairs are probably the ones that get messed up the most. These are examples of angles that are adjacent and supplementary. So these actually do form a straight line. So if we go back to the supplementary box, not only are these angles adjacent, they are supplementary, and because they do form a line, that makes them also a linear pair. So let's go up here. So if I have two angles that are adjacent and supplementary, so if I say that this is 120 and this is 60, they are adjacent because they share a common vertex and a common side. They are supplementary because together they add up to 180. And they actually do form a straight line. So we have an opposite ray here and an opposite ray here. Together that forms a straight line. So an example that would not be, so this is a non-example. Oopsie. Here's a non-example. So if this is 110 and this is 70, they are supplementary because they add up to 180, but they are not adjacent and they do not form a straight line. And remember, these have to be opposite rays. By definition, they have the same endpoint, which these don't. So again, there's another non-example. Vertical angles, two angles that are across from each other. They are always congruent. So because they are across from each other, these are never adjacent. Okay, never adjacent. Some examples would be if you have a line, or rather two lines that intersect. If this is 110 degrees, then this is also 110 degrees. Because I'm going to cover up part of this, so if I just focus on this piece, here's an example of a linear pair because they are adjacent and form a line, then that means that these also have to be supplementary. So if this is 110, that means that this has to be 70. I can cover it up this way, and this would also have to be 70. So vertical angles are always congruent and never adjacent. Let's go ahead and do some examples. Actually, I think I'm going to do a separate video for examples.